In the hot and wild lands of the Masai Mara, a young ranger named Kazi walked through the savannah, guided by his strong love for animals and nature. One day during his patrol, he saw a trail of blood on the dry grass. Fear hit him hard. Was it a hurt animal? A poacher? Or maybe even another ranger? Kazi was trained to act fast, but worry filled his mind. His heart beat faster as he followed the trail, thinking of everything that could go wrong. The calm feeling of the wild turned into something tense and scary. He moved through the thick bushes, alert and ready, but what he found at the end of the trail broke his heart. A big male tiger was stuck in a nasty trap made of barbed wire. Blood covered its golden fur, and the wire had cut deep into its body. The tiger was breathing heavily, clearly in pain. Its powerful presence was gone, and all that was left was a wounded animal, trembling and struggling to break free. Kazi didn't wait. Every second counted, and seeing the tiger trapped and in pain kicked him into action. He was completely alone. No backup, no help. Just him, the wounded tiger, and the wild bush all around. His heart was pounding as he looked closer. The tiger was wrapped up bad in the barbed wire, barely moving. Each time it tried, it only hurt itself more. Kazi's hands started to sweat as he saw how deep the cuts were. Blood soaked into the tiger's golden fur. He had no time to think. He reached into his bag and pulled out his wire cutters. The tools glinted under the blazing sun. The wire was thick and tough, and the first few cuts barely made a difference. It was like fighting steel with hope. The tiger groaned low and rough, its eyes locked on Kazi. Afraid, but somehow trusting him too. But that groan, that wasn't just pain. It was a warning. The wire was buried deep, cutting through fur and into flesh, and every tug risked setting off a storm. Kazi knew damn well this wasn't just a rescue. This was a gamble with his life on the table. His hands were shaking as he adjusted the cutter. No backup, no cage, just him, some tools, and a wild animal bleeding under the sun. One wrong move, one sharp sting too deep, and this tiger could snap. Claws, teeth, rage and all. And yet, it hadn't. Not yet. That trust, fragile as a thread, was the only thing holding this moment together. He kept talking to the tiger, soft and steady. I'm here. I'm not gonna let you die out here. His words were calm, but inside, he was freaking out. The wire was a mess, twisted all around the tiger's body, biting into the skin. One wrong move, and he could make the injuries worse. The heat was brutal, sweat running down his face, burning his eyes. His grip on the cutters was slipping, fingers cramping, slick with sweat and blood. Every second it got harder to hold steady. But one wrong move, one slip, and it was game over. If the tool dropped, if the pain pushed the tiger past its limit, Kazi wouldn't get a second chance. The tiger's body trembled, another deep groan rising from its throat. Raw, broken, and laced with warning. It wasn't just pain. It was a survival instinct, barely kept in check. Kazi knew it. He felt it in the way the muscles tensed under the fur, in the way those wild eyes never blinked. So he blocked everything out. The heat, the fear, the aching in his hands. He pulled on every bit of training he had. Precision, calm under pressure, every rescue drill he'd ever done. This wasn't a simulation. This was life. For the tiger, and maybe for him too. Minutes turned into an eternity as he carefully worked the cutters into the thick coils of the wire. His fingers were raw from the effort, and his arms ached from the constant motion. But still, he kept going. He cut through the sharp, jagged edges, the wire biting into his gloves as he worked feverishly, cursing the rusted metal that had held the tiger captive for so long. Finally, he reached the thickest coil, the one buried deepest in the tiger's flesh. The wire was old, rusted, and knotted like a curse. His cutters strained under the pressure, and his hands began to tremble. With each attempt to slice through the steel, the barbs bit back, scratching his forearms, tearing into his gloves, and slicing into his skin. Blood ran down his wrist, mixing with the tiger's. But Kazi didn't stop. "Come on," he hissed through clenched teeth, using his entire body weight to force the jaws of the cutter shut. His muscles burned, his breath grew shallow, but the wire held firm like it had a will of its own. The tiger flinched, growling low as pain flared through its limbs, but it didn't strike. It was as if it understood Kazi was fighting for it. Then came the worst of it. One final loop twisted tightly around the tiger's thigh, so tight that the skin had started to die. Kazi couldn't cut it directly. He'd risk tearing flesh. So he dropped the cutter and reached for his hunting knife, trying to wedge the blade between skin and steel. The edge slipped. The blade nicked him deep in the palm. Blood spilled and pain shot through his arm like lightning. But he ignored it. With gritted teeth and blurred vision, he kept working, sweat dripping from his brow. Minutes dragged like hours. At last, the final coil snapped. Kazi staggered back, almost falling to his knees. His clothes were soaked, his hands shaking, blood dripping from both him and the tiger. But it was done. The tiger was free. Its body collapsed to the ground, exhausted and torn. Kazi didn't hesitate. He ripped his pack open, grabbed the first aid kit, and got to work. His bandages were limited, but he cleaned the worst wounds, both the tiger's and his own. His hands stung as antiseptic soaked into his cuts, but he kept going. "I won't leave you," he whispered hoarsely, binding the last wound. The tiger's breathing slowed. Its golden eyes softened, watching him with something more than instinct, something closer to respect. He knew the law might punish him for acting alone. He wasn't authorized to perform an intervention like this. But rules didn't matter when a creature was bleeding in front of him, crying without words. Kazi sat there, breathless, the smell of blood and sweat thick in the air. He looked at his bloodied palms and knew. He hadn't just saved a tiger. He'd fought a battle against metal, fear, and fate. And he'd won. Alone. The tiger, though still fragile, seemed to sense the ranger's intentions. It glanced at Kazi one last time, its amber eyes meeting his in a silent understanding. Then, as if acknowledging the bond they had just shared, the tiger turned away, disappearing into the tall grass, its mane blending with the wilderness around it. Kazi stood there for a long moment, his chest heaving with the intensity of the experience. He felt a strange mix of exhaustion and pride. His hands were sore, his body covered in sweat, but his heart swelled with something deeper, something that only came from doing what others might deem impossible. He had saved the tiger, alone, with nothing but his determination and his unwavering belief in the sanctity of life. He went against protocol to help, and it could have cost him his job. And what if the tiger snapped? One wrong pull, one surge of pain too sharp, and it could have ripped him apart. All that effort to save it could have ended with his name carved into a memorial plaque. But he did it anyway, because sometimes rules don't save lives. People do. A few days later, Kazi was out on patrol, this time with his whole team, when they saw something charging toward the car. At first, panic kicked in. Everyone reached for their defense gear, ready for the worst. But as the dust cleared, they saw it wasn't just any predator. It was the tiger Kazi had rescued. Instead of attacking, the tiger trotted up and licked Kazi's boot, rubbing against him like a giant house cat. It circled him, letting out soft growls that sounded more like purrs. The team watched in awe as the tiger showed pure affection, reminding them all that even the wildest beasts remember kindness. As Kazi turned to continue his patrol, one thing was clear. This tiger would never forget him, and he'd never forget the tiger. In time, their story would become legend in the Masai Mara. It would ride the wind, rustle through the tall grass, a tale of courage, loyalty, and the powerful, wordless connection between Kazi and Zuri. A story that would live on for generations. A reminder that even the fiercest predators can become friends, if only we treat them right.